Okay, so the next thing is we're going to be making this as a GR1 Tornado. Now, straight out of the box, obviously it's not a GR1, it's the IDS, it's the German version. The big difference is the pod underneath the chin. Now, quick lesson, down under here, obviously we've got nothing on as per the German one, okay. GR1 has a targeting, it's not actually a targeting, it's a sensor pod on this side, okay, and then the GR4 has two pods, one each side underneath the chin, making it quite recognisable between the two difference. Great thing is, in the kit you get the pods, okay, but it doesn't actually mention it in the instructions anywhere, because obviously later on we're going to have, they'll probably do a GR1/4 version, okay. Trouble is, the pod we need, which is this guy here, which is the fatter, number 172, okay, doesn't have the glass bit on the front, because when you look at it, and here's a picture, as you can see here, it's clear at the front, top and bottom are solid, okay, so it can actually see through, and it does have a bar at the in the middle of it. So what I'm thinking is, okay, how are we going to do this? It's quite a large lump, and I was hoping I'd have some leftover sprue, clear sprue, which I could work with. Unfortunately, all I've actually got is, or the biggest I've actually got isn't quite big enough, okay. So what I'm going to do is we're going to laminate two together. So to start with, we're just going to clean up this pod, and because I didn't actually remember when I was putting in there, I haven't opened up the hole, but it's quite easy to do because the front of it comes to the front of the actual main door. Okay, so if we just grab a sponge here, we'll just clean this guy just a little bit, one side and the other. Now, I know this isn't going to be perfect, and the purists out there, the rivet counters, are always like, oh, it's too long, you need to, you know, so I'm not that worried about it. It's literally just for effect this. So this is what we're trying to do. So what we've got here is a couple of bits of clear sprue. Now, if we look at these, they're not that far out. Okay, they're good width, just they're not quite long enough, okay. And the thing is, they're slightly tapered. So what I'm going to do is, I'm thinking we're going to go side by side. Okay, so we'll have two like this. Okay, so we'll have two parts of it like this, because it's going to have a join, but when you look through it, it should be still clear. Well, that's what I'm hoping for. And then if you can imagine, these two side by side should be around about the right thickness as I sort of grab it with my finger, and we can taper and blend in and everything else that's needed. So to start with, we need to take off this little raised area here. So we're just going to sand this off so it's all completely flat. Okay, so we've got it there, then it's easier to push it down and do it than it is holding the actual file in your hand, because otherwise you tend to round off corners. But if you do it this way, you tend to get a far better finish. So we just take that out. I have got huge bits of acrylic rod, really thick, you could do the same thing with, but I'm thinking by the time you've sanded and put into shape, this will probably be just as quick. Okay, so we've got those done. So what we do now is I just want to take an edge off one, just to give us a more of a 90-degree look to it, and on the other side. So what I intend to do is glue this all together. We're going to let it stand for a little while, for a couple of hours, or certainly overnight, and then we can come in the morning and just sand it completely into shape once it's completely solid. Okay, so that's our two areas done. That's those nice and blended in and flat. So then what we'll be able to do is hopefully glue both of these into position. Just going to take a little bit more off this side. There we go. Okay, now for this I'm actually going to use super glue, purely because it's a speed thing and we sort of need this to hold and to get in there. Alright, so we're fine with how that one is. So what we're going to do is just put a blob in the middle. And how that one is. tell you what we'll do, we'll glue these both together first. The other thing you notice, if your super glue is old, it never quite has that bite like it did. Okay. Alright, and what we're going to do is, I'm just going to change my, I think what we're going to do is glue this totally on, and then we're going to worry about it all afterwards, once it's all in there. So we know it curves from the outside in a little bit more. Okay, so we're just sticking myself to it. Okay, just going to take a drop of super glue, and we're just going to run it all the way around this guy, literally all over it, just like this. Get off the mat before we super glue our mat, but the idea is this will completely encase, so then we can literally just come along and sand this guy in to shape. I'm actually quite happy with that. So what we're going to do, tiny bit of kicker. Okay, bit of air. Just to get this water start to go. Something like that. Originally I was going to let it go, but actually that's gone so well. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab the vise, going to bring this guy in just in here. Now the point of using a vise, which I know you probably can't see very well, but give us a sec. Ooh. Put it somewhat like this, hopefully you'll be able to see it. Is I can actually place the item in the vise, and then as we're sanding it and that, we should have quite a good effect. So what we're going to do, just take off this edge, and I think we can probably use a razor saw, just trim it down just a little bit, so hopefully you can see it at the bottom of your screen. So you're getting a bit close there, if I'm honest. A bit too close. Okay, so there we go, that's our part in there, just like that. So all we've got to do now is sand it into shape. Okay, so what we're going to do is just take a few moments of sanding. So I won't bore you to death with this bit, because it's going to take quite a while just to get in there, because we want to keep it all to that nice shape and everything else as we work our way around all of this. So bear with me. Okay, so as you can see, really getting there now. Okay, the only thing is we just need a little bit more bulk around this top area. At the top here, it's got a little sort of chip out of it. So actually what you can do is build up with super glue. Now all you do, put a little bit of super glue on the area you want. So we'll put a drop around the beginning, hold it upside down, let it dry. Okay, if you can't be bothered to wait, bit of kicker. Okay, pop it on, and then if you hold it, obviously because of the gravity it's pulling down, it should give you the rough shape. Now I just want to increase the bit at the top, so just going to go a bit at the top, hold it upside down, and hopefully the camera, or one of them, I know it's really difficult to see, but you might be able to see we've got a little ball hanging underneath. Okay, and that's what we're trying to do, just build that area a bit kicker. Okay, if you get smoke coming off and cracking, don't panic, just don't put your fingers near it, it's just the action as it's going on. Okay, so I've got a few little holes around it. So what I'm going to do is just going to cover the entire thing in super glue. And you might notice it actually goes very clear. I'm about ready to drip here. But you can actually now work your glue. It's a little bit like glass blowing now, because you're sort of revolving this around, and I'm sorry if you're not getting the angles, but I'm more worried about mine at the moment to get this right. But by doing what I'm doing, and this is just rolling it around, it's drying in those areas, it will give you a nice look. Now if you wanted to, instead of using acrylic, you could do it this way, but it'll take you quite a while because obviously we had to build up an area. But don't panic about it being quite clear or quite cloudy. Super glue, when you polish it, will go crystal clear as long as you haven't got any air bubbles inside it. And don't use too much kicker, because kicker generates heat, you get bubbles inside it. Alright, so we're just going to lock some of this in. Okay. So again, we're just running it round, building it up everywhere. Okay. Actually, we've just like doubled the length of it this particular time. Okay. And I don't know if the camera can pick this up, but we have got smoke coming off of it. I don't know how well you can actually see that. Smoke coming off. But you can see now, instead of it being quite small, it's actually quite a lump. All done with super glue. It's a little thing, you can do nav lights like it. I know a lot of guys, they'll come in and they'll actually do this to do navigation lights, and what you can actually do is put in a layer like this, then put in some red or green for the actual light itself, and then put another coat over the top. I think personally it's a little bit of a long-winded way when you can just use the parts and do it, but if you do lose your nav lights, you can use super glue and do it this way. And there we go, that's dry. Okay, so that's our little shape of the guy there. If we just drop this top cam down a bit, you can see. So we've gone from what we had to before to this. So I think we've got the correct length now. Okay, we've definitely got the right build up and everything else. So what we need to do now is literally just sand this all totally into shape. So taking our sander, but you might be able to see it's actual crystal clear in some areas on this. Other areas obviously is fogged, but by the time we polish this all up, we should be absolutely fine. So we're using a medium sanding stick. Okay, we're just going to try and get our general outline shape. So obviously this is very squared at the end, quite a bit on that one. We'll just use a stronger file. Okay, so we want our overall shape, and then once we've got our overall shape, we'll then start putting it into a point. Okay, so that's that one, and now obviously we've got to take this top off, okay, to flatten it down. But as you'll notice, when you're filing super glue like this, it's extremely hard. That's why we don't use it as a filler, because everything around it will sand away and you'll just be left with super glue and no plastic or anything else. But as you say, it's a nice demo in showing you building up with it. So excuse me whilst I just take our time. So we're just trying to continue this shape now to bring this up to the right area. So I'm just doing it roughly for the moment. So I'm pretty happy with how that is. Just going to bring the bottom round. Okay, I'm happy with the length, so we're just going to square the length off now so it's nice and flat. It's got a slight downward kink to it. Okay, really happy. And then what we've got to try and do now is, now we've got the actual overall shape, we'll just check it for how it's going to be. Yeah, I think by the time we sand in a little bit more, we should be absolutely fine. It should actually look the part quite nicely there. Okay, so then what we're going to do is just bring this, taper it in. Okay, keeping it flat. Okay, just trying to bring it in. You could probably, if you've got a machine, do this a lot quicker. But the only trouble is you run the risk of pinging it off. Okay, actually really happy with that side now. It's actually coming in quite nicely. Now it does go basically to a point. So what we're going to do is going to lay it down now. And see if we can't get it down to a point. Okay, looking good. Now the other side. This is one of those times where sometimes you impress yourself. I don't want to template and have it ping off the end yet. But actually this is coming in to being very, very nice. Okay, so just... part. The other thing as well, just be careful how much you do this because this is actually getting quite hot. Okay, so this is looking good. So what we're going to do now is just bend up the bottom. I don't know how much to a sharp point it is, but we're going to take it pretty much in just to a blunter side now. This is a finer grit just to polish this in. Okay, I'm sure this one just tacks up just a little bit. We're just trying to keep it smooth. And there we go. I'm pretty happy with that. Now if we wet it, we have, or by the time it's painted, there's our pod all done. Now don't forget, it needs to be masked up because actually what happens is it has obviously like a window on both sides that you can see right the way through. But I'm pretty happy how that is. That's given us exactly what we've wanted there. We got our shape. Alright, it's not crystal clear, but if I continue to polish this and get the buffers out and all the rest of it, we should be able to get the, you know, it quite clear. You know, we can start putting a shine into it. Okay, as you can see, now we're getting clear. Polish up this glass. You can see we're going to be alright. I think we're going to get away with that. So there we go. I'm actually really chuffed with that. Sometimes you do things that impress yourself. That's definitely one of them, okay? So there we go. That's about using super glue, building it up. Just take your time with it. Sand a little, have a go. Sand a little, have a go. And just build it up gently in layers like we've done there, okay? And there we go. That's our little chin pod and saved us waiting for the GR14 kit to come out. Okay, so with this part actually done now, looking really, really nice as you can see, what you've got to do is really just sort of blend it in to make it fit in precisely onto our system here. So actually what we've got is it's going to go roughly with the front line of the door, so it doesn't go any further, but also you've got the gun port as well you can work off, so it actually sits something like this. So obviously you've got clear access to the actual wheel well door, and obviously it opens a little bit, so just give it a little bit of breathing space. But what you've got to do is obviously glue it in so it all conforms and blends in and everything else like that. So you're probably going to need a little bit of filler unless you've got a spot on join. So we just grab our glue. Alright, so what we're going to do, I'm going to glue roughly the area just so I can put this on to start with and get a bite. Now you might notice at the rear it's got a little flat area, okay? Well, that is going to go to the rear part. So it's in front of this square door, okay, and runs down the side. But you have to allow a little gap at the front, okay, then your other one would normally run down here. Obviously it's on the starboard side, but hopefully you can see you've got hardly any gap on here. That took a lot of sanding because obviously the front edge was a little bit high. It had to push all that in as we go through. We've got a small gap you might be able to see on the underside, but I think a bit of filler will do that. So what we're going to do now is just going to weld action glue this in. Now Weld action glue isn't going to work with the super glue area, but you shouldn't need that, and any filler should take care of those joins. So we can just put this guy in and get it sort of welded into position quite early on, just so it starts to get a grip in there and everything else, and then we end up with something just like this, which gives us certainly a nicer look down there, and obviously it turns it immediately now into a very recognisable GR1. Okay, now the other thing as well, we've got this little guy here, and to be honest, in test fitting, it's not the best part and doesn't fit very well at all. So what I'm going to do is, there's plenty of plastic around it, I'm just going to literally glue this in, plenty of glue, okay, and we're just going to nudge it roughly into position. And I think the best thing for this, to be honest, is not to do that, but to literally push it in as best as you can. And then what we're going to do is just going to sand and blend it into position. Yes, and that knocking noise is still that nose weight, which is going to haunt me now forever about not using PVA glue in there. So there we go. You see a couple of little shiny spots here. I've re-glued these areas, and then we're just going to sand them in. But that's those on now, and then hopefully makes us a nice GR1 fit just like that. So we'll leave those to one side just to really go off, start to dry down and everything else like that, and now we get on with the gear. Okay, so next up is the gear. It's quite complex, so just take your time with it and work your way through. Cleaned up all the parts down here, as you can see. A little bit of flash, classic example, this little guy here, you might be able to see. Ejector pin, flash came up, it will affect your joints. So starting off with the main gear, so pretty straightforward to start with. We've got the two halves going together. Okay, so we're just gonna pop these in. So just let the glue flow behind, because it's quite a small part. I'm using a pair of scissors to literally get your crimp into the right place. Okay, and then just let that start to bite for a few. Okay, and then once you've done at one end, incoming through the top, we can hold the bottom. But as you can see, it's actually slightly bowed, so just be a little bit careful how you're doing all of these. Alright, so we're just going to give that a bite for a few seconds. Then what you've got is these little guys here. Again, clean those up. I've sort of over cleaned them, to be honest. There should be two little nodules out of it which go in these parts here, but certainly it won't harm to take those off. Okay, so we're just going to put those in. The little bar goes to the top, hold it back to front. Okay, and again, you could leave these off to be able to better paint the detailed areas and things like that, but I think it's just a little bit easier to do it up front. Okay, just give that a bit of a nudge. Okay, so then you should end up with something like this little guy. Okay, and he's not too bad, and what's going to happen is it's going to come along, and where you've got the little slot down here, this guy will then fit in it. We've got the right one, here he goes, and he's going to fit in it like this. Okay, so you say sidebar, this little guy goes in, alright, and it's going to go in there like that. But what you've actually got is a couple of these areas, these little guys on the top. Okay, so we want, and we got this one and this one, remember which one's which. And there's this little guy, and he's going to fit in the little top here. Okay, and he's going to swing just around to the rear, just making sure it's all in there. So just put glue in on the top. Okay, and this guy fits in here, just in like that. And just check our fit again, because you've got the little nodule. Okay, and that's going to fit in just like so. So just make sure that this one, try that again. Okay, because this little guy is going to come in underneath this joint here. Okay, so he sort of all fits in and locks around and everything else. Alright, then what you've actually got is then this guy, one of these, which actually then is going to come forward, which goes into the little slot on here. And again, they're all a little bit of a fiddle to sort of get them all to go in, because when this guy comes forward, if we make sure we've got this round the right way, it's just going to literally go in and tuck in underneath. So you're in a situation where you've got it like this, so just for lining up sake at the moment. Alright. So that's that. And then you say this guy is going to come in, I'm going to fit in there something like that. So we're just going to roughly glue it into position just for a second, and then what we can do is, once we've got a half a fit on here, like this, just going to let it bite. So put that one down. We're just going to do the same on the other side. Put one in, and then come to the inside. And again. So that's correct. Making sure it stays square. As I say, they're all rather little fiddly little guys into these. Sorry, in fact I think I've even got that one the wrong way around. We're only facing downwards. Which is something like this. That one's on there like that, so let's pop this one on here. Sort of rushing through these, you really need them to dry a little bit better. Glue in at the top. Okay, so that little guy is just going to sit in there like that. So we just let those dry off for a moment. Okay, the main gear itself, you've just got pretty straightforward on this one. 2 halves. Again, check for your flash, make sure you're all okay. If you're happy, then a little bit of glue up through the middle. Dropping down. Not too happy with it going in. It's in there now. So again, we're just going to use a pair of scissors, and we're not cutting, we're just pushing in. Because you're using a weld action glue, if you get any little areas like these which don't go in, a little bit of pressure hopefully will melt the problem areas together. Okay, and away you go. Then we've got the little strut, so again just going in the rear and the front. So okay, taking this one, so this one's just going to go into there. Okay, and up and in, touch more glue just down in here and here. The strut. Okay. One of these has got a tab as a bar, one as a hole. So we're just making sure they're squared and laying in, which goes in something like that. Okay. Then round here at the front, just going to drop a glue down here. We've got this little guy, which is going to have a little tab on the back here, which is going to go into the tab in there, and he's going to sit up at the front just like that. Now the thing is, we've got various angles and different geometries and things like that to go in there, so we just check our areas. Okay, so then what we're going to do is just going to pop him in, so we know it's going to be in like this. Alright, so we've got our little strut area. You can imagine he's just down in here. So what we're going to do is line him up with a hole whilst it's all still wet. Make sure it's all square and is put into position. Okay, and making sure we haven't knocked anything off. Alright, so we just sit that in square, that's in holding, and everything in there just like that. Okay, we're going to let that dry for around about sort of 15-20 minutes so it goes firm. Then we can take it back out once it's in and we know those positions are all set. That way we can then take it off, paint it, do all the bits and pieces, and then afterwards put it together. Now there is a few little bits as well to go on, but again I'm going to wait till that's completely solid, then we'll dry fit those onto it, then we can actually glue them in place. When we're happy then we can actually come off of it just like that. So we can do the same with the main gear as well. We've got these main ones which are now going to come in, which hopefully are starting to dry. So these ones with the little legs off it like this are going to tuck underneath. I won't do it quite yet until they're totally dry, but basically they're going to fit in like this. Okay, then what we'll do is, whilst they're there and everyone's happy, then what we can actually do is, if we get the right areas, we can then pop these in like this onto here, okay, and do exactly the same as we did the front, and then that way hopefully we'll be able to pull them out in one, and we've got this part off the back, and then that way we're all set. So then we can do all the painting and all the washing and that, which is likely to get knocked off and everything, then install the actual gear afterwards. But it's important to make sure it dries square and everything else, otherwise if it dries slightly off, then you come to do it, obviously you need to bend the plastic and stuff like that, and that isn't going to help anybody. So there we go, that's the gear. It's a little bit complex for what it is and everything else like that, but it's just the way that the Tornado gear is. So as I said, we'll let those bits dry, get them off, get the small bits installed onto it, and then what we can do is get this one over to paint.